Hello Internet, and welcome back to my channel. Thank you for the views that I've gotten. If you remember, last time we worked on a Boba Fett picture, and I kind of finished it without you guys. Sorry. Once I get started, it's kind of hard to stop, and I think he turned out pretty neat. Still got a lot to learn, but I do love the way that it ended. So we're going to continue on, and today we're working on Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon. He's just adorable. It's amazing how they could take something that's so dark and menacing and turn him into this adorable creature that you just want to love and hug and play with, and you want to own one to run around in your backyard. Of course, it would be really cool to have a dragon anyway, but it makes a big difference if he's super cute like this. So what I'm working on right now, I was trying a new idea. I've never drawn Bokeh before. If you don't know what that is, when you're taking pictures, then you ever notice, especially on Pinterest these days, those beautiful pictures of these solemn girls that are hanging out in these weird obscure places, and there's a bunch of bright lights behind them, and they're faded into these blurry, fuzzy circles, or sometimes hearts or triangles, things like that. And that is what's known as bokeh or bokeh. It kind of depends on where you heard it from. Kind of like in last time's episode where I talked about Copic or Copic Markers. I have heard that bokeh is the proper way to say it because it is the Japanese, it's a Japanese term. And I forget what it's supposed to mean. And so it's supposed to be pronounced bokeh. I learned when I was in college, I learned that it was bokeh. And I don't know, I've heard several people say bokeh, and that's what I prefer to do. So anyway, I was trying to draw that. And I don't know if you can notice over there on the left side, but there are a couple of light green swirls in there. And it's a tricky thing to try to undertake because there's supposed to be a bunch of colors behind it, around it, inside of it, and I'm just going to give it a go here. And it's kind of funny watching my pencil speed up so quickly like that. This video is really short. I sped it up because this picture, if I would have put all the videos on here the way that they were taken in real time, this probably would have been an hour-long video. Problem with drawing sometimes is that while it's super fun, and especially when you're working on a background like this with a bunch of different greens, different shades, different hues, is that it can get to be very tedious. You see that you do almost like no work whatsoever. You know you did a lot of work, but when you look at it, it's almost like, did I even really use a pencil on the paper? Because you have to do light strokes, then you have to do dark strokes. It's quite the process. A lot of times when I'm drawing, I will have either on my laptop or I will have on my iPad some kind of TV show or music playing in the background. So it's kind of a multitasking there, which makes it really relaxing for me. I usually have myself a cup of coffee or a bottle of water, and I just do whatever tickles my fancy. At the end of this video, you'll notice that I kind of did away with the bokeh, but I don't want to do a spoiler alert, but it didn't exactly go the way I thought. But that's okay. I was pretty happy with the ending in any case. I do love shading. I love mixing and blending colors. It's quite tricky, and I, of course, have never perfected it, but I really like working on it. I'll have to do a painting episode as well. I love the challenge that it provides. And it's amazing when I collect my colored pencils, I predominantly use Prismacolor or Faber-Castell. I think that's how you might pronounce that. It's kind of a shame. It's German, and I'm part German, and I don't even know how to pronounce it properly. That there are so many pencils, and they all have numbers on them, and they look so close, but in color and resemblance, but when you get down to the nitty-gritty, you can see there's just a slight change in pigment. It's amazing how detailed people have gotten with the blending of colors and the dyes. so that we could just be just a few numbers off to change the whole color. I also use Crayola, so don't let me sound like a total snob, because I started out with Crayola, and I've even done pictures like this, or even my Boba Fett picture, with Crayola. When I don't have the proper color, if you will, from a more expensive company, then I just use Crayola because that's what works. That's what I need, that's what I have, and so I make it work. A coffee shop that I go to sometimes for drawing night, one time they do themes, or not one time, they do themes weekly. And I was there for the night that they did dictators. I think that's what it was, dictators. So I wanted to go out of the box. Everybody was choosing like Hitler or comic book people, stuff like this. I chose Tutankhamun because he was, not Tutankhamun, was it Tutankhamun or Akhenaten? Akhenaten, excuse me. Because he had abolished the whole religious belief system and made his own god, and so, well, you can do your own research into that. But I colored the entire thing. I made it look like a statue. And by the end of it, one of the other guys that was sitting over next to me, he considerably older than me, and he's been drawing for a long time. He only does drawings with black ink and markers, black markers and things like that. It's beautiful work. He looked over and he's like, nice. He said, Prismacolor? And I'm like, nope, Crayola. He's like, really? I said, yeah. So it just goes to show you, you don't need expensive materials to create beautiful things. Not whatsoever. Of course it helps. Like right now, I'm using a Copic marker. Now, the funny thing is, I thought I kind of knew how to use Copic markers because, well, I'm like, oh, they're markers. Well, recently I watched a video on how you're supposed to use Copic markers for shading and highlighting. But these are some tricky little buggers because you're not just, normally when you go over it with a marker, like what I'm doing right now, it gets darker and darker the more you go over. Well, apparently the way these things work is that you kind of push the ink into the direction you want it to go, and you can do that with highlighting. And the more you go over it, it's more like, rather than making it darker, you're pushing and flooding other pieces of paper with the color. So what I'm doing right now is actually wrong. In the world of Copic markers, I'm doing it completely wrong. And by this point, I've given up on the Bokeh, and I'm just winging it. I'm just like, let me just go big or go home. Now, also the other thing about Copic markers, which I thought was a bad thing, it's not, is that when you look on the other side where I just flipped up my paper, I'm looking to see if it's gone through to the other side because I'm testing a new sketchbook that I got. And when I look underneath, I'm like, oh good, it's not dripping through to the other side. It's not bleeding through onto the other side. There were a few spots that were a little bit dark, but not too bad. And I thought, yeah, it's great. I love this paper. Well, after I watched that video about using Copic markers, the lady that was demonstrating was saying that you need to be able to see underneath if it's bleeding through, because that way you can push the colors around where you need to. I was like, oh, interesting. This is a lot more work than I thought it was. Now, I've sped up this particular video immensely. You can see it's kind of chugging because it's going so fast. And it's just because it took such a long time, obviously. It does look kind of funny because I've got all those stripes up in the corner and my green around Toothless is not very blended, but don't worry, we'll get there. This was just a trial thing. I just wanted to see how far I could push the limits with these Copic markers. And of course, the more you practice and use something, the better you'll get and the more you'll understand. So I jumped ahead and just filled in with a bunch of black. It kind of has a purplish hue to the picture, which I think is really neat. I didn't actually add any blue or purple. This is just blacks and greens. And again, it's not perfect, and it's certainly not what I was going for, but I think it turned out really nice in any case. I do. I love the greens. I love the blacks. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.